Is there a strategy that'll help you grow your company faster? CEO Sales Strategies is an investigative business podcast for entrepreneurial people who never stop asking questions. Highly acclaimed sales revenue growth expert Doug C. Brown interviews CEOs, business owners, and professionals who serve them to uncover and share actionable tips and methods behind their bulletproof sales strategies. Topics covered on the show include their failures, struggles, secrets, and processes that help them succeed in selling millions to billions of dollars of their products and services, all with the sole aim of helping you grow your business. If you are eager to know the most effective sales secrets from the A players of the game, then the CEO Sales Strategies podcast is certainly the place to be.
Hey everyone, this is Doug C. Brown with the CEO Sales Strategy, bringing you another great episode of the CEO Sales Strategy. And we've got a great guest. His name is Mr. Matt Nuccio. He owns a company called Design Edge Incorporated. They're at www.designedge.net. They're a company that designs, consults, licenses, manufactures toys, and they help companies. The companies that you and I probably have played with their toys through our childhood, middle age, and all the way through that we're still playing with our kids and grandkids. And sometimes, you know, when we get together with friends and we pull out a board game, they've had a lot of responsibility for helping get that to your home or your business. So excellent conversation. We talk a lot about some of the trials and tribulations of actually growing a company. His parents started this company in 1987 out of their garage, if you will. And the company's become worldwide over this whole period of time. And Matt is the president and forerunner of the company at this point. And we talk about the trials and tribulations of growing a company. We talk about some of the mindset around what should happen as you engage in certain aspects. We talk about what it's like to work in a family business versus a traditional business. And we also at the end cap up with how do you sell your wares or services to somebody like Matt, and what is he looking for in that process? So without further ado, let's go to the interview and let's welcome Matt. Matt, welcome to the CEO Sales Strategies podcast. I really appreciate you being here.
Oh, thanks, Doug, man. I appreciate you having me on.
You know, you've got a company. The company's called Design Edge Inc. or Incorporated, and it's one of my favorite things in the world, which is toys. You know, we all grew up with them. We all played with toys. We all learned from toys, and it's a great company. So, folks, those of you who are listening, check it out at Design Edge Incorporated or designedge.net is the URL. A great company. You folks, well, why don't you tell us what you do instead of me telling everybody what you do?
Sure. We design toys, engineer toys, prototype toys, and manufacture toys for the largest toy companies in the world down to people who want to break into the industry. So right across the board.
So all of us who have children, grandchildren, love toys ourselves, you know, or big adults who are still children playing with toys. You're kind of responsible in some capacity for helping those get to the market.
Yeah. I guess you could say I'm enhancing their lives or corrupting their lives, depending on which toy it is.
Oh, the wonderful part about what you do is, you know, we all learn through stories and we learn through toys, right? Because toys tell a story many times. I mean, there's company called Toy Story, I think, right? Mm-hmm. And you know, you've helped, you know, Disney and oh my God, I could just go on and on with the brand Sony and Mattel and all kinds of toy companies. And what I love about your story, because you and I had an opportunity to talk about this, is you come from a traditional family background.
Yeah.
And, are you second generation or your parents second generation?
Well, my parents are second. Well, my mother's first generation on one side and second generation on the other.
Okay, so first generation.
So my father's second generation.
Italian family, right? So, and you know, I come from I would say a third generation family as well. And my dad had his own company, and your parents started your business, I think, in the garage of your home in Long Island, or their home in Long
Yeah,
Island.
we like to say that Design Age is the other Italian family business.
So for those of you who don't know, look that one up, because that's, we could get into your history later on.
Yeah, we'll dig into that later. Yeah, sure.
But it started in what, 1987, and then you started working for the company, I think, at the age of 13 or 14 years old, if I remember.
Yeah, well, day one. It was my parents were in the garage doing it, and this is the old days, pre-computers. So, we'd be doing like packaging, and my job was to use an X-Acto knife and cut things like ruby lift, or lay down register tape, or sweep the floor, like all the grunt work. But it was a great education, so I don't regret it by any means.
No, I had the same. I started at the age of 3, and I was sweeping floors, and I made 25 cents a week. And I was so happy because at the end of the week, we could go to penny candy store and I could just sugar myself almost into a coma, right? So, but it was great experience. And I'd love to start there, because a lot of people think, you started out sweeping floors, doing the grunt work, as you said. And people who are coming into business, a lot of times, what I find when they're starting out, they don't necessarily think they need to do the grunt work, no matter what age they are, right? So, what kind of lessons did you learn from actually doing the grunt work and then kind of bringing it all the way forward? Because this may be an unfair question, because I'm bringing you back many, many years.
No, it's a great question, and I 100% agree. Well, there's a couple of things I'd like to inject into that. Well, one, primarily, you learn that you have to do things you don't want to do, right? And I think that's a lot of the reason why people, want to skip over that and not do the grunt work, is like, I want to focus on what I'm quote unquote strong at, or what I enjoy. Well, no matter how great it is, and how great you like your job, and how entertained you are by the job, there's always going to be things you don't want to do. There's some rock star right now who has to practice his scales. Like, it's just like these things happen, and it's hard work when you start a business, and you have to do all the grunt stuff. And I've seen, we help a lot of companies start up, and the majority of the companies that I see fail are the ones that quickly start hiring people to take care of all the grunt work because they don't feel like doing it, and they're really just burning a hole in their bank account and overpaying someone to do the grunt work that they probably could have banged out themselves a lot quicker.
And I think that's really sage advice, because a lot of companies, who are listening here would be startups as well as established businesses. But a lot of companies who are startups on these calls, I mean, when we started out a company, and because you watched your parents do it and you were involved in it, I as well. I think there's some lessons that are so learned during that period that you can't get if you just came in in the position you're in today, running the company, and you understand all of the facets of the company. And I think that's important. What do you think?
Yeah, well, so I've to lead into that, I've been going back and forth to Hong Kong for most of my adult life, and I lived there for a short while, and I was often told by a bunch of locals in Hong Kong, when they'd hear the story of Design Age, they'd tell me this proverb of which, first generation creates a business, second generation makes a business, and third generation destroys a business.
Right.
And the theory being that the second generation sees the struggles and learns from that, and really just takes it to the next level, while the third generation never had the struggles and immediately, as you say, wants to start off on third base and doesn't want to do any of that grunt work, and that will implode your company. And
I think that's very important for people who are bringing new people in. Even if you're an established business today, there's no shame or downgrade in forcing the issue of start at the beginning. Even if you're like Zappos, for example, they used to do something like this. They would take a vice president of sales job, and they would put them into the warehouse and into the beginning of the whole process. And what I learned from doing that, and I do the same thing with companies. Sometimes even when I go in and help companies, I'll actually get in and do the same jobs that they're like, well, what are you doing? You're trying to work on our sales team, right? And I'm like, I need to understand the whole flow of the process in order for us to be able to optimize that. So Zappos did this very effectively. And I think at the end of the training with Zappos, they would actually offer people something like a $10,000 buyout if they didn't want to stay with the company any longer, right? And they were touted as one of the top companies for, employees.
I'm wearing shoes I bought from them right now. So
see, Zappos, that's a testimony. So what I'd like to dig into, if you don't mind, is, family business versus traditional business. I worked in both. And family sort of has a different dynamic. And a lot of companies that I would say, aren't, well, I mean, look, Enterprise Rent-A-Car was a family business, right? So, they can grow to a large level. But when you're dealing with family and you're dealing with non-family members, there can be some things that come up that are a little bit different.
That's true. And I mean, I think Mars Candy is still privately owned by the family. That's gigantic. But yeah, there's a lot. The dynamics are very different. In fact, I think you're quicker to engage in arguments to some respect, but you also know that the other person isn't disappearing on you. So but you have to have a strong family and a strong family bond. I think one thing that we've always had here is that we can have issues during the day, and it's off once we leave the office. And I don't know how we've always managed to maintain that, but we do, and I think in my 30 years of doing this at this point, I can't think of a single instance where I left and I was like, I'm out of here. I'm doing, I'm sick of this. So do it on my own. It never happened. It just, I have the benefit of having my parents' advice, who started the business, but also my father has been in the toy industry since 1969. And that helped me tremendously because I not only got to know all the young guys as they were coming into the industry, I also got to meet all the, the heads of industry coming up, because a lot of the guys that he came up with were, by the time, I was fully engaged in the business, were now the presidents of very large toy companies. That was very, very helpful.
Absolutely. The relationships are always critical in any relationship in the world, whether it's personal or business. And what I think you said something here that was very critical to somebody's success, whether they're in a family business or not, but especially in a family business. At the end of the day, you check out and business was business and personal life is personal life. In other words, you don't carry it. And I think I can think back, like I had 3 brothers and we all worked in the business, and sometimes we didn't. You know what I mean? Like sometimes it was like at the end, it's like, let's just go out to the playground and smack each other around or something, right? But that's not a healthy way.
No. I mean, I always think of that scene in The Godfather, like, you don't discuss business at the dinner table. Like that's basically what it comes down to.
That's a really good point. But the thing is, and I agree 100%. A lot of times people bring business home. They'll bring things to them, and I think part of what they don't realize is life is not about just consistent, constant work, whether we're in a family business or in a corporation. And there has to be some cutoff for the enjoyment of life, or we're going to start to resent the business itself.
Yes, there is certainly some truth to that. Although there's a big difference between when I started in the business and now. I will say, at the time when I was working far closer with my parents, the smartphone didn't really exist. And, they've since, sort of stepped back and just have some minor roles and, more giving me advice or, help looking over the financials and always making sure we're healthy. But now it's very hard to disconnect from the business, and not with my family, but just in general. I've got an international business. I get texts sometimes at 3:00 in the morning. I'm always on. Like I no longer feel like I'm showing up for work when I get here at 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning. I've already been at work since I woke up.
You said something to me yesterday, and it exudes throughout your whole being. Is you said to me, "I love toys. I love the toy business." Right. So I think that's another critical part that people who are listening is like, look, if you don't love what you do, or at least really like it, you're probably in the wrong business.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if I won lotto and, I've had that fantasy when I bought a lotto ticket here or there, in my mind is never like, what am I going to do with it? I'm always like, okay, how would I put some of that money into Design Edge? I just think that's such a weird, like that my brain does that. I'm like, how do I, benefit this to what I do for a living? I'm never like, okay, I'm buying an island and that's where I'm going to drink, rum out of coconuts for the rest of my life. It's like, how do I continue to do what I'm doing? And yeah. So, and then I do step back and think like, wow, why do I fantasize about continuing to work even if I'm, set for life?
Well, it's, what is that old saying? I think it is, Matt, like something, if you work at something you love every day, you're not working, right? Something to to that
Right.
effect. I remember my grandfather when he was almost 90 years old. He used to make these little toys and out of wood, right? He would hand make them and he'd put them out on his lawn and he'd sell them. And I, so I was buying him like a bandsaw and I'm buying him equipment, as the grandson who loved him. And I remember asking him one day, Gramps, what, you're sad. Your house is paid off. You don't need to do this. Why do you do this? And he looked at me, and for whatever reason, Matt, he used to call us all boy, like all the kids. He looked at me and he said, boy, let me tell you something. When you get older, you better have something to do that you love or you're going to die.
It's very true. I have this conversation with my father all the time because, as his friends started to retire, and they were all looking for things to do. My father had no problem with that because he has so many hobbies, right? So he's got plenty of things to do to tie up his time. In fact, I don't think he has enough time to do everything that he wants to do. Well, he's got some other friends who are just like, I'm bored to death. I play golf once a week and, and they're starting to age faster than he is, I think, because they're just not keeping active.
Right. And that's, I'm convinced that's one of the things that, as I get a little older now, it's one of the things because my body acts differently when I was 28 than I am when I'm, this age, right? But if I hit my knee on the table, back then it'd be like, haha. Today it's like, oh my God, I'm gonna be knocked down for 6 weeks. So, and I think your dad had a lot of great lessons that he passed along to you. And how important do you think it is for us as leaders of companies, our own companies, when we have other employees or we have children or whatever working in the business, is it something like people should really pay more attention to, like the lessons that we learn through business and life we could pass down through generations? I almost feel like it's an obligation. What do you feel about people who are in positions as you are?
Yeah, I think it's everyone should be passing down the knowledge they have to their kids and grandchildren, right? I mean, I look back at how my father handled me, and obviously in the early days, some of it I hated. When I was taking garbages out, and and there was employees that were I'm 15, 16 years old, and some of the employees are 20, because they're right out of art school and they're picking on me, like just like busting my chops, having a good time sending me out for coffee and bagels and pizza. But at the same time, when my father had meetings and we would travel to, say, Rhode Island to go to Hasbro, or back then we'd have to go to Mount Vernon, New Jersey to visit Tyco, which was a huge company at the time. And I would just come along and shadow him. And I look back and I'm like, he had a 16-year-old kid with him, and nobody barked in the boardroom meeting, and I got to know all these people. And, I just paid attention and I listened, and not only did I learn from him, but I learned from the people that he was doing business with. So I think I got a very good sense of how the toy industry worked very early on.
Your father employed the work to learn philosophy, which so many very successful companies and the people who started them, when I interview them and talk with them, they say exactly that. You can work to make money or you can work to learn. But when you work to learn and you make money, you win both, and you get an education like you did in these boardrooms, more than a Harvard University education. No disrespect, Harvard, but when you're in these type of meetings that you're in, those are real life. It's not book smarts any longer. And the fact that you were able to because my kids, the same thing. I used to drag them along with me when I was 4 or 5. They were in a tax seminar when they were 5 years old and they're bored out of their mind. But today they know the lessons of some of these things that they actually went to, and it's propelled them ahead to be, I would say, more competitive in the world, because of the knowledge that they have. So I think it's a great lesson for people to grab off this podcast on this. Your father, we don't always know when our parents are doing it. Sometimes, especially when we're teenagers, we're like, yeah, they don't really know better, But then as we get to be our age, or I'm older than you are, but your age and my age, we start looking back going, Dad was pretty smart, or Mom was pretty smart,
Yeah. Well, it also gives you a natural confidence, right? I think that's what I gained from it mostly. Wasn't a fish out of water in my first couple of meetings as an adult. I'd been in them. There was a comfort level there, and I knew what people were talking about. So, it's been of great benefit to me. I mean, by the time I was, approaching 30 and I was meeting people for the first time that were about my age, who were in the toy industry and, starting to get up a little bit. I mean, they were all looking to me for advice because I had already been doing it for, over a decade, and they were just like flabbergasted that I could answer questions about certain things, and it's great. In the industry for the longest time was an old man's club. I think I was one of the youngest people in the toy industry until I was 40. It was quite crazy.
Well, I mean, it came up in the older traditional blue chip day. You know what I mean? Like,
I mean, I often reference in these conversations like cigar chomping, guys in their office, making quick decisions, and the toy industry and the garment industry, both birthed around the same time. It was just little small shops, either Italian or Jewish owned that were had small factories and in Brooklyn or outside of Chicago, or and just did things the old-fashioned way. And I don't think until really the 90s did it really start to become corporate.
You know what? That's a really good point. It's a really good point, especially with what's going on now today with all the great resignation, if you will, and everything that's shifting again. Because people think this is new, like, oh, we're all shifting to something. Well, we're evolving, right? And now the millennials and the Gen, I think Z at this point is, coming up, and they're going to be in the same position you were in with your father. Mm-hmm. And then 30 years from now, they're going to be in the same position that you or I are in. And this is the evolution of life. And the reason I'm bringing this up, Matt, is because so many people are talking to me today about, I can't, get smart, good help, that type of thing. And I'm like, listen, the IQ of a millennial or a Gen Z is probably higher than ours. Right? and the grasp of the technology is certainly better than ours. So is it them or you? That type of thing.
Well, it's to me. So I have two sons, but I'll use my youngest son as an example right now. It blows my mind that every time he's got to do something new, like when he knows he's got to do it in like a few days or something, when he gets there and I'm like, and he's got it all figured out, I'm like, oh, cool. You just like figured that out. He's like, no, I watched like a couple of YouTube videos before I got here. Right? I just think that's great. Like that, I would have never, right? In our day, I would have had like find an encyclopedia or go to the library and read. Like that was already hours of commitment. Like they can learn things in 3 minutes in like a quick search.
And we as baby boomers or traditionalists, the older, we can learn from this. And so I find that with what's going on with people, they're looking now, and I don't know in your company if this is happening too, but new employees are really looking more for quality of life than they're looking for just money.
Yeah, no, I've definitely, millennials, I've definitely had those conversations sometimes when people want to leave at 4:00, and I'm like, that's just not how it works.
Right. So millennials, just as much as there is something I would say that is you want quality of life, but at the same time, we want all the finer things in life. You don't get to positions of making millions of dollars or more by working 3 or 4 hours a week, no matter what Tim Ferriss says in his book. Not to pick on Tim, I think he's a great guy, but the reality is, we've got to get in there and pay our dues. And just like you did with your dad, going to boardrooms and learning in all those years. We're talking with Matt Nuccio, who owns a company called Design Edge Incorporated. He's the president of it. They're a toy company where they do design consulting, licensing, manufacturing, and they're pretty responsible for putting many of the toys in your children's room and closet and games that you play with everybody. By the way, I just bought Monopoly the other like 2 weeks ago, and I was playing it with my daughters. They're ruthless. My God, they're so.
It's a bit skewed Monopoly. If you grab all the good spaces immediately, you're going to win.
yeah, exactly. Well, it's a very good. So that's where I want to kind of transition to. Like, toys actually are great teaching lessons for things in life.
Oh, the value of play. Yeah. I mean, they absolutely are. You learn how to be competitive. You can learn new things. You can learn strategy. You can, the power of imagination, the power of being creative. These are things that, people just take for granted when they're playing with the toy. There's a lot to be learned from toys. And I think it's by design that we as children want to play. I think that's how we evolved. That's just how the human beings need to play to grow.
And adults are really only big-bodied kids anyways.
Mm-hmm.
And if anybody thinks I'm wrong, go play a game with your grandchild or your young children.
Yeah. Well, and there's adults. I mean, you see behind me, you think 4-year-olds are buying the Blues Brothers and Animal House action figures? these are grown-up kids who collect these things.
Yeah, but on the Big Bang Theory with Sheldon and his friends, I mean, that was action figures were a big deal, right? And that's a huge industry, which a lot of people don't realize. And toys in general, like even when I was playing Monopoly the other day, I was learning, how my daughters were thinking about, real estate. And then we were negotiating like, hey, if you trade me, Marvin Gardens, I'll give you, Park Place. And we're doing the bargaining game. And that's real life, right? When we get talking to people and we're in business, we're constantly negotiating. It's not always just for money. It's sometimes just for a position, relationship, associations, and business, in family or traditional. Do you believe business is a team sport?
Yeah. I mean, it's an ecosystem, that's for sure. You're never going to become super successful on your own. Even, if you look at music, even a solo artist has a team behind them. They still need a band to play the music. They still need promoters and agents and all that other stuff. So there's no true independent, I think we're pack animals.
That's a really great way of saying that, because I was in the music business, right? So I worked with some of the professional bands, and you're right. I mean, Bon Jovi might have his name on the band, but he's got a bunch of musicians, or take any of them, right? Billy Joel, I mean, great pianist, and but he's got a great band behind him.
It's funny that you mentioned both those artists are somehow tied to the toy industry. Bon Jovi's cousin works in licensing, so I deal with him. And then Billy Joel's a guitar player from the Billy Joel band for many years was in the toy industry. And I used to have to deal with him on a regular basis. He also lives near Design Edge, and we've seen him a few times in restaurants.
That's pretty cool. So I should schmooze up to you so I can get some premium tickets down the line, possibly. Matt, trials and tribulations. I mean, your parents started out in 1987. Your company's very successful. But I'm going to make some assumptions that it wasn't always just straight up, and that, there was probably a few moments.
Yeah. I mean, so of course there's ups and downs. There's been times where we're rocking and rolling, and then our main account gets bought by another toy company, and then all of a sudden that completely dries up. You've heard it a million times, but you can't have all your eggs in one basket. And now, since then, I panic anytime one account gets too big. We have to get even out with another account. Traditionally in recessions, toys do well because it's one of the few things that people don't cut out. Of course, lower price point toys, they're not going for the higher price point toys. But even 2008 though did hit us really hard because that wasn't like your classic recession. That was a real estate bubble that collapsed, and it really affected everyone's bank accounts hard. So that was recovering from that took a little longer than I would have liked. But yeah, I mean, of course, and then you make business mistakes, right? So anyone trying to grow a business is going to try new things here and there, and you're going to fail sometimes. You're going to try to do things one way and then discover the expensive way that you should have done it the other way.
The fact that you are an optimist, which is a learning lesson for people, because the reality is you're happy. You're one of the happiest guys I've talked to in the last 3 months on this type of podcast. And, by the way, folks, there's always an industry that people will say, oh, that can never, ever, ever, it will never take. Like, I can only imagine back when somebody was trying to develop the first, car, right? The motorized horse. People were saying, we'll never replace the horse. It will never, ever, ever do that. Or television was pushed back. Or ATM machines, they didn't use them for 10 years or so, right? But we all take this for granted today. That's like, oh, this is normal, get in the car, drive down. And
it's change. I always, when people say like, There's two arguments to that. And I go straight down the middle, right? Where I go, things change, but things stay the same at the same time. And if you can be aware of that, you're living in the moment, right? You have to be in the now, right? And that's where I try to, I think I naturally am in the present. And ironically, well, not ironically, strangely, I've noticed everyone's trying to live in the present out of nowhere since like COVID. It's like this big yoga thing where people are like, be in the present. I'm like, I do that all the time. I'm trying to get out of the present sometimes, right? But to my point, I like to say, like, you know what? Well, TV didn't replace the radio. So let's not act like things always supersede each other. Sometimes
that's very true. I never even thought about it that way. TV didn't replace the radio, and radio didn't replace what? Storytelling, right? Because that was kind of the...
Right. These are just new mediums, and everything else is tried and true. Storytelling is storytelling, and it has been since the dawn of man. And you know, it might be a completely different way 1,000 years from now, but there'll still be stories to be told, and there will still be toys to be played with.
Well said, sir. Now, if somebody wants to get a hold of your company or you at Design Edge, how do they do so?
They can email me at matt@designedge.net. They can go to our website, designedge.net, and a lot of people reach out to me on LinkedIn, which is just my name. I don't know if you're going to type it there, but MattNuccio. Yeah, and we're always looking for people with good toy ideas, or somebody who wants to start a toy company, or a toy company that's looking for further development. We never know where the next great idea is coming from, and we're there to incubate it and grow it.
Well, we'll put everything in the show notes for everybody here. Matt, I really appreciate you being here. I have one last question that I would love to ask you, which is, you're in a position of what a lot of people who are trying to sell. They would love to get into an account your size. They would love to talk to the decision maker of the company. When people, what they would be calling selling, which you would probably attribute to buying, right? So how do you like to be approached, and what is kind of some of the methodologies, if you've seen, that are kind of like a complete turnoff, versus somebody that's acceptable, at least to start the initial conversation or to build rapport?
I mean, just be friendly. I think you got to break the ice first before you slam me with how brilliant you are, and this is gonna change the world. When obviously I deal with many people on many levels. Dealing with a corporation is different. They sort of just contact you, a meeting set up, you talk about a project. When an individual wants to start a company, or they have an invention that they want to develop, I have to be sold on them before I'm sold on their concept, because as soon as we start working with them, I'm going to be dealing with them for quite some time. And if I feel like it's a personality I can't deal with, I will just walk away. But above and all, the product itself has to be really good. So we see a lot of stuff that I can't do much with for whatever reason, whether it's terrible, or the timing's off, or it's just the technology isn't where it's supposed to be at this time, or it's antiquated. There's a million reasons why things don't work. But product is king, but the personality behind it is just as important to me.
All right. So those of you who are listening still, write that one down, because Matt, that was worth gold to people who embrace this, right? The reality is you'll evaluate the product based on its own merits. But what you're also looking for is the relationship in some person that's actually going to be trustworthy, respectful, fun, make your day a little better, and actually be more of a friend than just a salesperson, if you will.
Absolutely. And somebody that I know can take the ups and downs and can possibly take a beating. And then also, if they're successful, not become, too headstrong. They right. Can, looking for a stable person, just like looking for a wife, right? Like, you want to base it on
that. We both could get in trouble. That's funny. Matt, I really appreciate you being here. I really do. I know people are getting a lot out of this, and folks, check out what's in the show notes here. Or go to designedge.net too and check out the website. It's really cool. And I appreciate you being here, Matt. Any parting words that you leave for anybody who's like, people right now, some people, you're like, oh my gosh, I got hit hard by the economy, the pandemic, this happened, but now they're sort of trying to grow back. Any sage advice that you might be able to impart upon them?
I don't know. I sort of live on the don't ask, why, ask why not.
It's a really good point of view. That's, I suspect That's part of the reason your company's been so successful, is because those are the questions you're asking. It's like never focusing on the problem will solve the problem. Focusing on the solution to the problem and removing the cause of the problem through the solution is what solves problems. So
you're very good. You want to do sales with me? We can walk around trade shows and you can explain what I do. You do it better than I do.
I'd be happy to, Matt. Thanks for the compliment. All right, Matt. Well, you take care. Thank you again for being here on CEO Sales Strategy Podcast.
Thank you.
I love talking to this guy. Matt is so easy to talk with. He's such, as he said, he's always optimistically looking at things. He's always living in the present. And sometimes for him, it's really because he's trained himself to live in the present so much, he's not able to take himself and go back in the past or go to the future. And when it comes to relationships of problems and failures and things in life and in business. And that is a success trait that I have found amongst all CEOs, all owners of companies who are doing really well. They look at something and they go, okay, look, this is a problem. This is a challenge, but I'm not going to look at this as the world is going to end. I'm going to ask a question. And I learned this question from Oprah Winfrey, which was, what do I learn from this? What is this? What lessons are here to be taught to me? And when you look at life that way, when you're faced with challenges and problems, because we did talk about trials and tribulations here of growing a company. And when you look at it in that optimistic point of view and curiosity, and you look at it like, you know, a little butterfly in your hand, you go, I wonder what makes this thing fly. And when you look at your problems that way and you go, I wonder what could make this problem now fly in the direction I want it to go, you'll start asking better quality questions and getting better quality answers. And that will lead to better quality outcomes. This is a guaranteed success trait across all successful CEOs, business owners that I have ever talked to. And you know, what I love about Matt is he's just so open to sharing information. And that's part of the reason is because he's optimistic and because he's so positive on things going forward. And that is literally a state of mind that can be conditioned. So I would challenge all of you that are listening to this to give that some high consideration. The notes are in the show. The show notes are in the list as we always publish. If you love this podcast and you like this type of content, I ask you to please subscribe to the podcast or tell other people as well, or tell other people as well and have them subscribe to the podcast. If you really love it, give it a 5-star review. The more reviews, the more subscriptions, the better the algorithms, the better the positioning of the podcast, which can help more people with that particular content. And check out Matt's company. Start with designedge.net. As the website. He's involved in a lot of other things in vendors associations and different things. Really special, smart person in life. I appreciate him being on the podcast. And as always, if you're looking for help to get yourself or your team to the top 1% of sales globally, or you want to hire, train, retain, and manage A-player elite salespeople, I'm your guy. Reach out to me at doug@ceosalesstrategies.com. or Doug Brown 123, which is the LinkedIn, or call the office number at 603-595-0303. Let us know what you want for content. We'll source people, we'll bring them to you, and you can get your answers on this podcast. Thanks again for attending, and I look forward to seeing you on a following podcast. Go sell something, sell a lot of it, sell it profitably, be happy, live in the moment to your success.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the CEO Sales Strategies Podcast. What is something that you learned that you could act on today? Don't forget to schedule it now, or it may never get forward momentum. If you find our content valuable, please leave a favorable review and let us know what you liked. Please also share this with others if the content will help them. For our show notes, other episodes, and more interesting content and resources, please visit ceosalesstrategiespodcast.com. See you soon, and to your continued success.